All right. 5 more days you can savor all this election talk. How many? Whatever. I'm counting down. Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, I won't talk about it.
I don't know which can come quicker, right? Quick enough. All right. So last time we got almost entirely through the Singer discussion, none of the Poggi discussion. That was good though. We had I thought a constructive conversation. I just wanted to quickly tie up the stuff about Singer that we didn't quite get to, which will be very quick, and then go on to Poggi. We ended up here, right, which is, if you remember, Singer's argument starts with doesn't start, but he tries the main motivating move is this thought experiment about the pond. He says if there is a kid or some innocent person drowning there, and you can actually wade in and save that person's life, you morally should do so, even if it comes at a significant cost to yourself. The example was a $500 suit that we used, but the suit wasn't exactly the thing that mattered, right? It was, generally speaking, you should incur some cost to do this. How much of a cost? Well, you can go strong or weak, right? Strong or weak not being sort of, that's the weak here is not a pejorative term, right? It's supposed to be how demanding. So more demanding or less demanding. The more demanding means, well, you have to incur a lot of cost all the way up to the point where your cost would be greater than their benefit. In which case you'd be doing something irrational, right? If you're just destroying value, if you're giving up more than you get in return. So don't do that. That's the strongest really that you could go. But more weakly, and probably more interesting, almost nobody believes that we should keep sacrificing for the sake of others right up until the point where the world as a whole it becomes a net loser. Most of us think, well, you might have to do something for the sake of other people, help other people out, but not completely at your own, to the expense of the cost of your whole life. So you have to do some things, but not everything. And so then you might go for a weaker principle, which just says, well, you give up to some type of threshold, right? What's the threshold? Well, Singer says, let's say that it's something where what you're giving up is morally significant, and we can fill that in later, what exactly morally significant means. Right? You might disagree with Singer, but at the very least, he thinks we agree, by virtue of the thought experiment, that something like worth $500 is not going to be morally significant yet. And so, if that's not it, then, well, we should be giving away a lot more than we do. Right? That's basically the upshot.
So for the strong principle, what does it mean by you should give your money until you give up more than they are gaining?
Last time I said it like this, you could think about just the difference in value that you lose when you give away your money. Right? So you give away, if you use your money to not save another person, you're going to use it in some other way, and that other use has a certain amount of value, right? Does a certain amount of good. Good for you, good for other people, good whatever, right? Does some good.
Basically, you're not giving it up until you're broke?
Well, not quite, right? So the idea is that every time you give up a certain amount of money, say $100, you're giving up some amount of good, right? Now, it's not just that you're destroying it, right? Like if you set the money on fire, then you just lose that good and nothing else comes of it. But if you give it to somebody else who maybe needs it more, then that person is going to gain a lot of good because of that. Right? And so his idea is, on the strong version, is you should give away as much up until the point that the good that you're giving up is equal to the good that they would be receiving. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're broke, right? It might mean that even though you have a little more than I do, the next step if you give more to me, then you would lose more than I would gain. Then that's the point at which you stop.
That's why you stop.
But it might also be the other way around. It might be that even if you're poorer than me, if I still gain more than you would lose, then you should still give, and you should move your money to the richer. That's just how the calculation plays out.
So I should give more until they start to gain more than how much I'm giving, and that's when I stop.
Yeah, so think about it this way. Let's say I have $1,000, right, and you have zero, right? Then we ask, so how good is the $1,000 for me? Let's say 1,000 points of good, right? That's going to measure it in some way. 1,000 points of good, right? and you have, well, $0, let's say 0 points of good, right? So I give you $100. Well, the first $100 are really, really valuable for you, right? So let's say that they give you 500 points of good, because you can now go from literally living on the streets, having to hope that you find something edible in a trash can or something, right? To buying food, right? Maybe finding shelter for the night, right? So 500 points of good. But for me, I go down from 1,000 to 900. So how much do I lose? Well, not 500 points, right? It's just, let's say I lose 50 or something, right? So now I have 950 points of good, and you have 500 points of good. Right? Whereas before it was 1,000 and 0. So this is a good idea, right?
So somebody gave the 500. But you
Worth, right, in terms of the amount of good that was created. Yeah. And here we go. Look at this. This is the best way I can do it. All right. I should draw you a graph. This is not going to work with words. The idea is, like, we can draw two bar graphs, right? So the more, let's say that the bar represents value, right? So everything that's in here, this is the amount of good, right? How good it is for you to be up in a certain level. And the higher we go up here, the more money you have, right? So here's someone else who has a lot less money, and so this person only has this amount of good, right? Right? So poor, much worse than rich, let's say. That's the basic idea here. Now, let's say you give $100 of the money that you have to this person, right? How much good is created? Well, graphically, anyway, it's not the most felicitous way. Forget about this, because I would have to make it wider.
You did the bottom money given and
So, hold on. So if you just lop off some of the value that you have with the $100, right? So you lose money, so you lose value. So let's say that lops it off here, right? So that means this is the difference here in value that you lose. Right? This is your minus. This is your loss. Right? This other person gets $100, but because they're very poor, those $100 mean a lot more to them than it meant to you. So for them, they gain a lot more, right, in value. So for them, the difference is this thing here, this gain. Right? Let's call this this loss A. Let's call this gain B, right? And so B is bigger than A. And so you keep giving on the strong version up until the point that B equals A. That's basically the idea. And once A starts getting bigger than, if A starts getting bigger than B, if this sign flips, so you go beyond the point of equality, that's when you should stop, according to the strong version. Right?
Don't you mean when B gets bigger than A?
No, B is bigger than A. B is the gain, A is the loss. So it doesn't matter. Well, okay.
Oh, so you keep giving it to A and B are equal.
So gain for the poor is bigger than loss for the rich. Right? So keep giving, right? So this first loss is not that big. The second loss will be a little bigger. The third loss will be even bigger, right? Up until the point that you also only have $100, and then those last $100, if you lose that's when that one hurts the most, right? All the $100 you have to give up. You start with 1,000, you go to 900, sucks, but you still have $900, right? You go to 800, sucks, but you still have 800. But 900 to 800 is a little more problematic than 1,000 to 900, because the choices you face are going to get constantly more difficult, right? And if you go from 100 to 0, now you're going from some food and maybe shelter of the night to absolutely nothing. So it's from 1,000 to 900, maybe you were talking about, can I go out for dinner tonight or not? Right? I have to cook myself. And going out for dinner instead of having to cook for myself, that's nice, but it's not, can I have shelter for the night or do I sleep on the street? Right? So the loss, those last $100, if you lose those, they hurt way more than the first $100. And vice versa, the first $100 you get, they help way more than the last $100 you get. Right? So the idea is that the loss here gets progressively bigger, and the gain here gets progressively smaller. Right? Right? And so you keep getting down and down and down up until the point that this gap here is the same as this gap here, basically. That help?
Thank you.
Maybe it's clearer even if I do it like this, right? Like, let's say that we have a tremendously big and a really, really small bar, right? And so the first amount of money that you give up just really loses this much value, and this person doubles in value or something, right? Or more than doubles, triples in value. And then that one, the second time, goes a little bit bigger, and this one gets a little bit smaller, right? A little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller. Now, if this person from here is going to go down further, the gap is this big, right? So this much value is lost. And this person, now we're transferring it to that person, but it only does this amount of good there. So only this much value is gained. Can't even draw the arrow properly, that's small. Right? That's stupid, Singer thinks, right? Because you're making yourself way, way worse off in terms of value, the stuff that matters, than this person is gaining. So now you're just destroying value in the world, right? Like, why should you make yourself off? Like, why should you give up the possibility of sending your kids to school so that the other person might be able to buy a Starbucks instead of a Dunkin' Donuts coffee or something like that? Right? I mean, that's a small gain. It's a little better. Nice, but it's not as much of a difference as kids going to school or not. Right? That's a big gain in terms of value. So don't do that, right? But you do it up until the point where the loss to you is as big as the gain to them. Or at least the next step would be your loss would be bigger than their gain. Yeah.
So for the...
That's the strong version.
When they're equal, when the gain for the poor and the loss for the rich equal, is that the stronger or is that the weaker?
So neither view says that you should go beyond equal ever. Right? The strong view says you should go up to equal.
So the equal is...
Right, that's the cutoff point. Now the weak version says you can stop much sooner than that. Right? And so they'll have to, if you want to have the weak view, you're going to owe yourself an answer about what's that point, right?
So I could be any point.
Yeah, so Singer, deep down, Singer is a utilitarian, so what he wants is he wants to maximize value. Right, so that's the strong view. The strong view says, well, if I lop off this little small piece and I get this big piece in return, that's a winner, right? Like I'm creating more value in the world. So I'm allocating the money in the places where it does the most good. And a utilitarian wants to do the most good. So he thinks that's ultimately the best answer. But very few people are utilitarians. So if you don't want to be utilitarian, you say, no, that's way too much. We can't demand that people give up everything for themselves so that the most good overall is achieved. That we constantly have to be making the world the best it possibly can be. But so if you want to say that, then you say, well, I don't have to do that much. I have to do something less. Of course, then we still need to know, okay, up to what point, right? And so Singer says, well, call it something morally significant, and then you can figure that out later. But for the sake of the argument here, it doesn't really matter that much because whatever that point is going to be, Singer thinks we're not reaching it. Right? We don't give up enough, nearly enough, on a daily basis or annual basis of our money that we reach. Whatever, on any acceptable theory is going to count as important enough, right? It's morally significant.
So,
Yeah, go on.
so the weak
Thought I saw something better.
The weak principle is when you can stop giving whenever.
Well, not whenever, right? So let's think about the thought experiment again of the pond. Person is drowning, and if I don't jump in because I don't want to get my suit dirty, we all agreed last time that that would be a morally terrible thing for me to do. I'm required not to do that. Right? Required to not let my suit get in the way of a life. So if you think that, then it's not whenever, right? Because if the cost here is yes suit, no suit, right? That's not going to be good enough, Singer thinks, because we just accepted that. That's what the intuition tells us of that pond. So that's not morally significant, a suit, even though it represents $500. So then presumably $500 is not significant, so you can't stop at that. Right? So you should ask yourself, like, this is Singer's thinking, right? So ask yourself, what would I be willing to give up to save that drowning child? You, in all honesty. Come up with an answer that you honestly can live with, and then translate that to today and give that amount to people who need it, who are dying in the third world. Because that's, if you're consistent, that's how you'll live. Yeah.
So, saving the child will fit into the womb. Will it fit into the strong principle of?
Yeah. The strong principle will require you to save the child, but so will the weak principle. Because the weak principle allows you to get off the hook of saving sooner than the strong principle. But saving the child is still, the intuition tells us we should do it. Whatever acceptable theory is going to be, whatever theory is going to be acceptable, it's going to require you to save that child. Right? Right, we all agree. Right? So even if you want to believe in a weak theory, so that says you can spend a lot more on yourself than on other people. The strong theory says you spend as much on other people as on yourself, right? As long as the value overall requires it. Don't give preference to yourself over them. We're equal. That's the strong theory. The weak theory says, no, you can give preference to yourself. But not only yourself, right? You cannot just think of yourself. You have to sometimes think about other people. That's what the thought experiment about the drowning child shows, because it's going to cost you your suit. But we all thought you should do it anyway. You should sacrifice something for yourself, namely the suit, to save the life. If you think that, right, then whatever the monetary equivalent is of that suit, if you can today save a life, then you should give that up. And Singer thinks you can. So, yeah, right.
I think the failure in that analogy is saying that giving it up is the best way to help them. So, like, take for example Bill Gates. Say that he could have done that. He would of course save the child. I think most of us would. Probably at mostly any cost, even if it was our own life. But it would, and you can't say, translate that, and he should, if he just gave everything he had at the time to the poor, that wouldn't do as good as much as if he used that money for himself, started Microsoft, revolutionized the world, brought jobs to so many people. It's just like there is so much more benefit to him not giving any of that away, using it all on himself. It helped way more people than had he followed that principle.
Yeah, good. So, like in a recent book, Singer has a response to this type of argument. He says, his idea is, there's two parts to this idea, right? Like, if you're going to spend the money on yourself rather than the kids, you better make sure that you get something like Microsoft off the ground, or otherwise it's just an excuse. Right? So that's one. So if you're actually like Bill Gates and this is actually a realistic thing for you, then maybe yeah. But if you're not, right? If you're just going to buy the Starbucks coffee, say, and there's no clear path about how this might lead to Windows, whatever version we're at right now. Windows 10 or something being developed. If it's just a coffee, then just give up the coffee. That's not really the choice we're facing. So that's one version of the argument that he offers. The other is that he thinks, we could probably save lots and lots of lives. He thinks he's quite optimistic about our possibilities to save lives. He thinks we can probably save most, if not all, of the people who really are in danger of dying, without having to thereby give up, destroy the possibility of Microsoft being developed and so on. So that's an empirical claim. You have to look at whether he's right to say that. All right. Anyway, so that's the logic of the principles, right? So the strong says just keep lopping off until the point the next step down is bigger than, or at least as big as the next step up for the person who's receiving the money. And the weak principle says keep going down, keep giving up things up until the point that your step down, the next step down, is too big. And then we have to have a theory about when is it too big, right? We don't know, but whatever, you can come up with that yourself. Singer thinks either way, it's going to be true that you're going to have to give up way more than we do right now, right? Because too big is not giving up your Starbucks coffee is not too big, right? Even the $500 suit, the intuition told us, was not too big, and you can buy a heck of a lot of Starbucks for that. Right? So, all right. So what does that mean? What's the upshot? Well, so this is the point, of course, the philosophical point that that Singer is making. He says, well, we tend to think about these cases of like saving dying people in the third world as a case of charity, and charity usually is thought to be like something that a good person does, but it's not an obligation. Something you can pick and choose. Like you should do it some of the time, probably. Sometimes it's called an imperfect duty. Basically, it's an idea that there's some discretion in there. Right? But obligation is not something that's a discretion. Right? If you promise me to meet me for office hours on Tuesday, let's say, then you should. It's not that you can sort of pick and choose whether you come. No, we have an agreement. You should come, right? And so should I. If you get married and you offer someone your vows, you say, I promise to stay faithful, then that's not something you can pick and choose, right? That's an obligation. You should stick with that every day, at least until you get divorced. If you're going to get divorced. If you have an obligation not to beat me up, right, that's not something you get to pick and choose. That's something that applies every day, all day, right? At least until we get into a boxing ring or something like that. So that's something. So Singer is saying we shouldn't think of this as charity, something we can pick and choose. This is a requirement. Up until that point where it's too much, you have to give. And every day you don't, it's like walking past a pond with a kid drowning. And we agreed already that wasn't a choice either. You have to step in. Michael? Well, it's a good question, and I can give you a technical answer, but like, what turns on that, you think? Why does that matter? Or is it are you just interested in it?
I just feel like if someone is being a recipient of someone else's duty to do something, then they have to be, they have to have some reason.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so some theories of rights would imply this. Right? So some theories of rights say that if there is a duty that is directed towards you and intended to benefit you or something, then that's sufficient to give you a right. So maybe you might say that when I'm in a position to actually save you, and I'm obligated to save you, that you would have a right that I do so. Some people think so. Is that a problem, you think? What matters? What's stake saying that somebody has a right? Like, so one thing that changes if you say you have a right to something is that if you don't get it, that you are wronged, right? That if I don't do whatever you have a right that I do, I'm caught. Like I'm actually. It's not just sort of regrettable or wrong in general. Like I'm wronging you, right? So, if you think that there is a right to be saved in these cases, then, well, it's not just that. If I walk past the pond and let the kid drown, right, that this is sort of just generally regrettable, or maybe like just shows I'm a lamentable person. But it actually shows something further that I'm not giving that child what they can legitimately expect of me. Right? So I'm wronging that child. And so maybe if the child survives in one way or another, then I should compensate them or something. Or I can can get damages from me or something like that. Right? So stuff like that might follow. Maybe we get a lot closer to the idea of the obligation being enforceable. Rights usually are enforceable. Not always, but usually. So things like that might be at stake. Claudia?
I mean, if you take that first, he says we should donate to help people not starve. But do they have a right to our money, to us helping them, or isn't it more they have a right to their society working in a way that they can earn their own money, or they can have their own food? Isn't that more what they have a right to? They don't have a right. Why would somebody in Africa have a right to my money? That's just something I could see that there's a right to survive and everything, but doesn't that right have to come from some own obligations you have to?
From the right has to come from what?
From some own, you have obligations in order to also have a right. Like, I
Yeah.
can't just say I have a I have a right to vote, and that can't be taken away from me, so I'm not going to go voting. Or I have a right to go to school, but I'm not going to go to school. Like, there's like always like a two side to it. And, like, when it's more that they also have to then have the obligation of working in their own system to improve the situation.
So usually, let's see if we're on the same page here. Like usually, when people say things like what Michael is saying, they think of rights and obligations connected, not necessarily in the same person, but like to say that if I say that I have a right, and there's different kinds of rights. That's right. So, but anyway, the most obvious kinds of rights, the standard types of rights, are called claim rights. The idea is you can claim these against someone else. Meaning, if I have a right of this sort, this claim right, then someone else must have an obligation they owe me. Right? So I have a right to my life, right? Meaning somebody else, actually lots of somebody else's, right? Like everybody else, has an obligation not to take away my life. Right? And so that's how we analyze the right? So like I have this right here, and you can think of it like as a string. Like I hold one end of the string, and everybody else holds another end of the string, and that's the relationship between the right and the obligation or the duty on the other part. Right? So if you violate your duty not to take away my life, for example, by killing me, right, then because we are in this relationship, the fact that you violate your duty means that you violate my right, because there's this connection between you. Right? So, can you not? I thought you were talking about the rights and duties in the same person.
Yeah,
which seems,
exactly. I understand that concept, but I also have like, I mean, obviously it's my own right to kill myself, like that makes sense. But I also have the obligation not to, if I don't want to kill myself, not to bring me in a situation like, for example, knowing I can't swim but going for a swim or something like that. Like, isn't that like that's what I'm thinking about? I just feel like it's also.
yeah.
I just feel like he's saying it very simply, just saying, okay, you have to donate because like that's your obligation. But like I just don't see why somebody else would have a right to me donating money.
So let's say, yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of interesting questions buried in here. Like for example, not everybody thinks you can have obligations that you owe to yourself. You seem to think that Kant thought that you can. Famously, Kant thought you can. You thought you have an obligation to develop your talents, for example. So you thought education was important because you owe it to yourself to make the most out of whatever your mind can be, right? But it's a tricky idea. Like so, if that's an obligation, and if that obligation then has a right attached to it, I mean, so there's certain rights that maybe some rights are inalienable, right? But lots of rights I can waive. So for example, the right that you don't punch me, I can waive, right? By stepping into a boxing ring with you. It's okay to punch me if we're in a boxing ring with gloves and everything, you know. It's not a right that's inalienable anyway. It's perfectly alienable. People do it every day. So then the question is, well, so I have the right that I have a right against myself. I do my best to develop my talents. Now, can I waive that? Can I just say, well, not today, right? Or maybe just not. Well, if the answer is yes, then the obligation doesn't really mean anything because I can extinguish it by just waiving my right against myself. That's a weird idea. So if the answer is no, then why not? Like, well, maybe because I'm wrong, but I'm the one who's doing it. How am I wrong if I don't want it, right? So anyway, there's lots of paradoxical stuff that shows up. Maybe the idea that you were having was something like this: that to talk about a right not to be killed, for example, is only one part of a fuller story that really we have to tell, which is the right to life means not just that you're not to be killed, but it's also the moral value of a life implies a right against other people that they don't kill you, but it also implies like living your life well or something like that, right? And you have that responsibility yourself. That seems true, right? So, is that true for every right? Well, I'm not sure. But if you promise me to show up for at my office hours, I'm not sure there's that much more implied than just show up. And in any case, maybe these people should be working hard to try and take care of them. Most of them actually are. Right? They work really hard all day to try and survive. Does that change that we have a right, that they might have a right against us? I'm not sure I see that. But I'm not. Am I on the wrong track here?
No, it's just that's say that somebody has, I don't know, I don't know if you were saying it, like,
Okay.
like not all, like there's this.
All right. Say your hand up a long time ago. So.
That's all right. To go back to the weak example, you said the weak argument example. You said for weak, you give until the next donation that you give is like you can't give that away.
Yeah.
So basically, like your second to last leg, or basically, I have an example. So you have 100 pennies, and you keep giving. You're giving someone who has 0 pennies. You give them increments of 10 pennies, and then you finally have 10 pennies left. Is that when you stop?
Yeah, that might be it, right? But it might come sooner than that. So that depends on.
Depends on how you can sustain yourself with.
Yeah, and it depends on what you think is too much to ask of a person. So the weak version says you give up until you have to give up until requiring people to give up even more is asking too much of them. And so when do you get there? Well, Singer doesn't tell you, but that's because he thinks this is too weak anyway, like you should really go further than that. But if you want to have a theory that is more, in Singer's terms, maybe a more egoistic or selfish theory that allows you to, where we say, even though you could save a person and it would cost you seriously, this is too much to ask, then you owe us an answer about why it's too much to ask. Right? And so different persons and different theories might have different answers. Right? You might think, well, maybe saving one person a day is enough or something because that's your fair share. And if everybody saved one person a day, the whole problem would be solved. That's an answer. Singer doesn't like that answer, but that would be an answer. Right? And then just whatever that costs. What does it cost to save one person? Maybe it's $500. Maybe it's cheaper than that. Or maybe it's a different answer, right? Maybe you say, well, it's not exactly like how many people are saved, but it's more the pressure that it puts on your life. So like $500, that's not enough pressure, but once it really starts harming sort of the relationship in which like your family bonds or something, right? Like you can't really properly show love for your kids anymore because you can't buy them toys, and to show them love, you sometimes want to buy them toys and stuff. You know, that's the point at which you cut off.
And then the strong argument, like how would that apply to the penny?
So it would have, like, so you start giving like 100 to 99 to 98 to 97 to 96 to 95 to all the way down up until the point that the hurt that it puts on you to give up one more penny is greater than or equal to the benefit that it gives the other person to receive that penny. So think of it as a scale, balance in scales, right? Like the weight, the pain that you put on one side by giving up a penny is no longer outweighed by the benefit that the other person gets from receiving the penny. Right? So once that scale starts tipping, that's the strong version says.
Okay, so you can give more to the point where their gain is higher than your loss. You have to give to the point where your loss is the same. It's the same as the gain, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So once that balance starts tipping over, that's when you stop. So, yeah, right?
I think the bar graph was really confusing. I'm telling you, a line graph, if you have it, 0, it's neutral, good, bad. That's how it starts. One person has 100, the other person has 0. At the other end, you give in all of it. It's still 0. That person has 100, and you have 0. Then they're both level. And this axis is the amount of good. If you give a little, then it's you have more good than 0 and 100. So that the fact that it goes up at some point means that it is a curve. You don't know where at that point, but the fact that it goes up at all. So I think that'd be
maybe you can try and draw one for him. I'm going to go on because we are falling behind again. So anyway, so that's the point that Singer is making is between obligations and charity. That distinction breaks down. The other one that's more important for our class is that also if you see like for Singer it doesn't really matter. This is a point he spends some time on making. He says, well, why might you think that you should jump in to save the kid who's drowning but don't have to give away the monetary equivalent to save people on the other side of the world? Well, one reason you might think is just distance, right? That you're closer to the kid. The kid is right there, and these people are on the other side of the world. But then he says, I don't really see how just adding yards is going to make a moral difference. Like a life is a life, so he thinks that doesn't work. You might, of course, think, well, these are fellow citizens, and those people are foreigners, but Singer isn't much impressed by that either. He thinks, well, a life is a life is a life, right? Whether it's an American life or a Somali life or what have you. So if he's right about that and we can't really figure out what the difference is, then the distinction between taking care of our fellow citizens and taking care of making sure that people across the world aren't starving, that distinction breaks down as well. Right? So you really have to think, Singer tells you, not about like, well, we have to take care of our own first or something, or we have to make sure that the American poor are not being hurt by whatever we do, and so on. No, you just ask where can I do the most good? Like, where can I actually make an impact and save a life? And that question doesn't have borders built in, right? So, and this point, of course, is now well made. Like, you should be giving up a lot more. Yeah, Claudia?
So would you not care if, like, you just said you have to donate? It doesn't matter if the donating you do saves a life.
Hey, Ryan, can you do this after class? Because I can't hear what she's saying. So.
Like, does he say it doesn't matter, like, what life you save? Like, if it's exactly the same value if you save a life here than if you save a life in Africa? Or does he make a distinction between the values of those?
No, I think I think they would be equally valuable to him. Other things equal, right? Like maybe if the person in Africa is this horrible dictator who's in the process of abusing lots of other people, then that's probably not a good idea, because by saving that person, you're killing many other people. But if we have a like Charles Manson here or something, then that's the same thing, right? So the point being, so if we have similar persons here or there, then there's no moral difference, he thinks. That's a very utilitarian idea, of course. But it's also, you don't have to be utilitarian again to believe this, right? If you believe that in some version of sort of human equality, quite quickly you're going to get there. Right? Let's think about it this way, right? Like, let's say that I'm walking past a pond and the kid is drowning and it's an African kid. Right? Does that change my obligation to jump in any way? Probably not,
well,
right?
Like, for example, it would be probably more expensive to get a person here to that standard of living where he's okay, and in comparison to like the ratio of getting someone in Africa to like.
So who's more expensive?
Like the money you have to spend here is like, if you go to this point where like how much does money that I give somebody change for him? Like it does less here. Like if I give somebody
right. No, sure.
Here, it does less than if I give somebody $5 in Africa.
Right.
So like you would get to the point faster where like.
Right. So good. So if we weigh the lives the same, then we have to ask, well, where does the money do the most good, right? And Singer thinks
send the money to Africa.
Exactly. Right. And that's exactly the opposite of the standard view, right? The standard view is first here and then there, right? Yeah. So that's part of what Singer is attacking. All right. So here are two questions. Quickly, I'll just raise these and then move on. Just some methodological question, right? So the way this argument goes is you begin with something that's very intuitive, right? This principle that you have to save people. And then he goes to say, well, because this principle is very intuitive, I'm going to draw an implication from that principle that is very unintuitive. And you should accept the implication because of how intuitive the principle is. Right? And you should ask yourself, well, is that the right way to go? Right? Last time we talked, maybe with Claire, I think we talked a little bit about this. That you could go in the opposite way too, right? You could say, well, because the implication is so counterintuitive, I now start doubting the principle. And this is part of the second point here. What you should really ask yourself is, the pond example is very intuitive, right? The pond example is just kid drowning, you should save the kid. Singer gives you an analysis of what is going on in the pond example, right? His analysis is his own principles, the weak or the strong. That's a question. That's a move that he's making. That's not itself built into the example, right? The example doesn't have Singer's principles written on it. The example only says you should jump in and save the kid. A variety of principles is consistent with that. Right? One of them being his own, But there might be other ones. We haven't seen them, we haven't talked about them, but you have to come up then with a principle that might work. But in any case, if you think that his conclusion is counterintuitive, yet you want to hold on to the intuition about the pond, maybe there is some different third principle that you can come up with that doesn't get you all the way to Singer's conclusions, but gets you to maintain the intuition about the pond. Now that's tricky, right? I can't tell, like, if you come up with a good principle, you should publish it, because it's going to be a major contribution, but that's where the action is going to be, right?
Sorry, couldn't you just disagree with what he says about distance and the number of people, though?
Yeah, so you could...
He says, okay, I say that distance doesn't matter and that number of people doesn't matter.
Right.
And like, if you say that, if you say, okay, this is the pond example, distance doesn't matter, number of people doesn't matter, so this is my counterintuitive conclusion. But if you say, okay, personally, I feel that, yes, the principle is right, but distance doesn't matter, so for me, like, the number of people matters, or doesn't matter, or whatever, that's how you could say that his conclusion is wrong. If you disagree with one of his...
Yes, for sure, yeah. Yeah. It might be... What's the saying? A tough road to hoe or something? A tough road to hoe? Is that the saying? No? I think that's what I think I've seen it. Anyway, unless you can tell me some sort of story about what's so important about distance, that sounds not particularly plausible yet, right? Yeah. So, because I mean, Frances Cam, who's a excellent moral philosopher at Harvard. She writes these enormous tomes that are really complicated stuff. But she's well known for using very elaborate thought experiments. And so she has this thought experiment. She says, like, suppose that you're not actually at a pond here, except it's a pond somewhere in Europe. And instead of you walking in and being able to draw out, what you have is you have a monitor, a live feed with a camera there, and there's a robotic arm, right? And there's a button. You can press that button, which will make the robotic arm go in and pull out the kid, right? Do you have an obligation to do it? Right? And she thinks, yeah, obviously you do, and just add more miles to it. Maybe it's on the moon, right? Do you have an obligation to do it? She thinks, yeah, doesn't matter how many miles you add to it. If you're in that position, you can do it. So that puts some pressure on that suggestion. But anyway, yeah, so that's one of the roads that maybe you're going to have to go down if you want to get out of Singer's argument. All right. This is fruitful stuff. So, all right, Pogge. I'm going to go a little faster. So Pogge is a very different argument, right? So Pogge also thinks that we should let go of the traditional view that inequality or poverty within our own country or society matters more, morally speaking, is more important than inequality or poverty globally. That's what most people think. That's what all the politicians are telling us, right? Like, we should take care of the American working class. And so Singer thinks no, right? And Pogge also thinks, actually, that's not really sustainable. Not because Pogge doesn't care about the American working class. He does. He thinks he's a very left-wing guy, so he thinks they should be given much better treatment than they are now. But in particular because he thinks we underrate how badly we're treating the world's poor. And he has an argument that's quite different from Singer. Singer goes through this moral duty to help, right? It's an assistance argument. You have the obligation to jump into the pond. You have the obligation to send money to save. This is a positive duty of it requires you to do something, right? You can't just stand by and not do anything. Pogge thinks you don't even have to go that far. Even if you want, let's say that you want to be really hard-nosed, right? And say, Singer, I don't like your conclusion so much, I'm actually going to change my ideas about the initial example. Right? Now that I've thought it through, I've come to see that yes, I would jump in because I'm a decent person, but you cannot require people to jump in. No obligations of assistance. There's a couple of libertarian philosophers who've said this now. I think, well, actually we can't buy a duty of assistance. It turns into something that's way too demanding immediately, but because of Singer, that's what he showed. So Pogge thinks even if you go that way, even if you reject everything that Singer has said, there's still the case that we ought to help the world's poor way more than we do now, Because what we're doing to them is not just a failure of assistance, it's actually we're directly harming them. So the chapter that you've read is his argument for why he thinks that we're in this relationship, not where if we don't do anything, they're over there, we're over here, and everyone's for themselves. No, that's not the situation we live in. The world we live in is one in which we are engaged in a relationship, and the relationship is one in which we're sort of kicking them down. Like we're actively harming the world's poor. So he thinks if you accept that you have a duty not to harm people, which is just a negative duty, right? It's not a duty to actually positively help people. It's just a duty to just let them be and don't don't hurt them. Don't make them worse off than they would otherwise be. That's something that just everyone, even these hard-nosed libertarians who want to say like in ponds you don't have to jump in, they accept more than the one thing they really do accept is you cannot harm other people. Right? Then still, everything about the world's poor will follow. All right. So here's how the argument goes. Lay it out and I'll talk a little more about it. So if you help to, or if you coercively impose an order, like a legal order or something, or an economic order, that substantially impacts people, people's economic freedoms and opportunities, then you need some type of justification for this. So you think, like, let's say that I'm going to force you to live a certain way. Well, it's at least your first thought is going to be like, hold on, what gives you the right? So maybe I have the right. Maybe I'm the government, right? I'm an elected politician or something. You voted for me. That might be a story that justifies me doing this. Or maybe we're in some type of emergency, right? And if I don't do this, maybe I'm a stewardess or something at an airplane. We just had a crash, and now I have to organize the chaos that's going on because otherwise everyone will die or something. Right? Okay, maybe that's a good story, right? Some type of story you have to give, right? A good one. So, all right. Now, internationally, we have an economic order, the way in which different countries interact economically, and that actually does substantially impact people's economic freedoms and opportunities. Right? That's the way the world is structured around governments with their laws and how international law, that structure how trade internationally can happen. There's one of the least favorite points for Poggi is the so-called TRIPS agreement, which is the international enforcement of intellectual property, like patents on medication and stuff. We'll see more of that next week. And he thinks things like patents on important forms of medicine, they really affect how people can live. Right? Because it affects what type of life-saving treatment might be available for them, whether they can afford it or not. So malaria medicine is very cheap to produce, but not very cheap always to buy, because it's protected by a patent. And so the company that produces it overcharges. That's the whole point about the patent. Right? You can charge more than just the cost of production. So that substantially impacts their people. So if that's going to happen, right, if we're going to live in a society, in a world, where things like patents are enforced across the world, then we better have a good argument for that. And then he thinks, well, let's say that the economic order is... Is this thing vibrating all the time? Maybe I'm just tired. I see these letters dancing around. Yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering. I thought for a second we were having like an earthquake or something.
I think it's
doing something, right? Yeah. I'm not drunk.
I noticed what you said. It's really stressful.
Yeah, it is kind of a disturb. Anyway, so.
The wind blowing.
All right. The wind? Yeah. Anyway, so if we live in such an order and it needs a justification, then he says, well, here is one thing that would make you fail to have a justification. Like here's a story that's not going to be good enough. If an economic order is imposed by a small minority on a big majority, and that order actually contributes to the majority being in life-threatening poverty, and that can be avoided, well, that's a bad thing, right? So you think, well, we can go all deep in philosophical, social contract theory, this or that, utilitarianism, what have you not. Let's not do that. Just say like a very minimal bar is as long as like one thing that we definitely know that things have gone horribly wrong is if there's a small minority that's keeping this big majority in life-threatening, avoidable poverty, then that's not acceptable. Right? Like whatever your story is going to be, that cannot be one of the acceptable outcomes. But he thinks we actually live in that world, right? That's our world. He thinks there's a minority of rich people in that we often call the West, and there is a large majority of people in the rest of the world that are in life-threatening poverty. That's avoidable, he thinks, and we're imposing that on them by things like these patents and so on. And so that makes this global economic order unjust. And his argument is, by maintaining this order, we're killing people, literally. So that's basically the argument. He has a variety of versions of arguments for this. I was just giving patents, but we'll see some other ones too. All right, so if you look at this, right, there's a couple of moral and economic empirical premises. I'm going to go through these step by step. So separate them out in the moral premises and the empirical premises. Any questions so far, by the way, before I move on? Yeah, Claudia.
To the global economic order, like you asked us to define it. Is it just like the system by which the global world works together, or like? Because I understand like why he doesn't agree with it. I just like in trying to define it, I couldn't really.
Yeah, it's a great question, and he doesn't give you a nice description of it at any point, right? He just throws it out as something that you should know what it is.
It's just like how the global community interacts, like how the specific national orders interact.
Yeah, so it's going to be sort of like maybe the best, in one phrase, summary would be sort of the international rules of the game. So things like international law, international institutions, or treaties and stuff like these. There's a variety of rules that you have to abide by, and that's going to be together the global economic order. One of the things here you can see that sometimes people worry about is that this order might seem kind of nebulous and sort of patched together from a lot of different places and institutions and countries and treaties and so on. And then if we look at it together, we might call it an order, right? But is any one of us actually are we imposing that whole thing, or are there several people who are imposing parts of that, which then that's one place at which maybe things can come apart. But, yeah. Reggie, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say when I was reading trying to read, how he said,
you didn't like the text?
Not at all.
Okay.
It's just so hard to get to. But what I thought, even when he said global economic order, was like you had to have the country has like a military force,
Mm-hmm.
or you have to have like a police, not only a police state, but if your country has a police state or military force that can impose your rules on the rest of the minority, I guess that would be called a global economic order. It says something like you got to have a military force.
Yeah, so he thinks this is good. I'm not sure if you have to have one, but but you're right to point out this part of the story. He thinks when he talks about why he thinks that the minority is imposing the order on the majority, he thinks there's the economic and political power of the West allows us to do this, right? So.
What I read was that the global economic order is thought of as stability. It depends on the presence of substantial police forces that prevent and deter rule violations.
Right. Good. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. So he's saying these rules of the game. So there's 2 points here. I thought you were talking about a different point, but so the thing you're pointing to now is this: the rules of the game internationally. So the things that allow the laws that make trade possible. He thinks these are not just rules of like chess or something, right? That if we have a chessboard and we have pieces and we decide to move them around in another way, fine. That's how we decide to play chess, whatever game we call that, right? So, but the global economic order isn't like that, right? Because if we start trading by our own rules, let's say we have a trade and we don't pay any tax on it, right? That's not going to be people will bother us, right? Like men with guns will show up and will force us to play by the rules that are set, right? So it is imposed, right? And it does affect how we can live. And he thinks, well, if that happens, you better have a good justification for this. And he thinks then the way this actually plays out is we have a small group of countries forcing the rest of the world to live by rules that are making the rest of the world really, really poor. And that's unacceptable. That's basically the argument. The other part of the story that I thought you were talking about is he says at times, like, okay, how come this small group gets to force the rest of the world? And he says, well, these are really powerful nations, right? So they have armies and so on that can take them back. Yeah, same.
My understanding of the global economic order, I don't know if I'm right or not, but does it have to deal with minorities placing rules onto, I don't even know what I'm going to ask. I just don't understand what the global economic order is. I just see that it's considered unjust by Kobe.
So yeah, well, to think about it, sort of international law that has to do with things like trade or finance or monetary flows, things like that. And that takes place both at the level of individuals and companies, but also at the level of countries, right? So one of the things that Poggi talks a lot about is what he calls the resource privilege and the borrowing privilege. And so these are what he has in mind is like the right of countries to the borrowing privileges to take out loans. Right? So you have international loans. So a lot of developing countries have big debts to either the World Bank or to IMF or to just individual countries. Right? So that's one way. The rules that structure this. That's one thing. The other, the resource privilege, is that countries have the right to sell off the natural resources of that are buried in their soil. Right? So the Nigerian government, famously or infamously, sitting on a bunch of oil, right? And it gives these permits to companies from the West, usually, to come and drill out that oil, and they have to pay the Nigerian government for this privilege. So that's an example.
So it's how.
And by the way, that is not just a coincidence. That is part of international law, right? So international law gives each country sovereignty over its own resources, meaning that anyone who wants to touch those resources needs to go through the government of that country, and they don't give it away for free.
I see. So it has to deal with commercial negotiations and
things like that, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And so so if you think about the oil stuff, right? So like there's a infamous thing called the resource curse, right? So if you look at especially in Africa, if you plot economic growth against resource richness, right? The intuitive thing you might think, well, the more resources, the more growth you're going to have, right? Because you can sell these resources, they're worth a lot of money. It's the opposite, right? So the more oil or diamonds and stuff are in the country, the poorer it gets. That's how it actually plays out. So why is that? Right? Well, one of the reasons that this happens is that these are countries that are usually torn apart by civil war. Why is that? Well, because if you manage to become the party or the person in power, you now get to sell off all this oil to whatever company will pay the most, right? Which is billions and billions and billions of dollars, that's rich living, right? They're about as rich as you're going to get. So you have all these groups in these societies that literally start fighting each other for power so that they can be the ones who are selling off the oil or the diamonds or what have you. So blood diamonds are a case of this. Right? So it's tremendously destabilizing to have this resource privilege where the government can just sell off the oil if you're the effective sovereign. And so he thinks that's part of the rule of the game, and it leads to tremendous poverty in these countries. Life expectancy, like Sierra Leone, for example, life expectancy is, I looked it up, was like 38 years or something. Like that's the average lifespan. It's ridiculous, like half of what we have.
The resource curse can cause poverty because people will be fighting over the resources within the country?
Yeah, right. So the rules are set up so that if you're the one who's actually in power, doesn't matter whether you're democratically elected or just a tyrant, you get to sell off these resources to Shell, BP, Texaco, whatever. Right? Now, you don't have to shove that money into the pockets of the people of Nigeria or something. You shove it in your own pocket, whatever. The international law doesn't ask about that. It just says, are you the sovereign leader? Yes, then you get to decide. So what that means is there is this big incentive, right? Like if you manage to be the leader of whatever kind, right, you can start lining your pockets. And if you put that big of a price on power, everyone's going to want it. That's the basic idea here. If everyone wants it, and if it's that much money, they'll fight over it. Right? And so that's one of the things. That's by the way, this is a standard. That's not some esoteric idea. By the way, this is a standard analysis of why resource-rich countries tend to be very poor. It's because the existence of resources is a catalyst for conflict.
Because they distribute the money to the only to the people at the top, only
Right.
to themselves.
Yeah. Right.
And then the people at the bottom are suffering.
Right. So, like, if you live in Alaska, you're super lucky, right, that you live actually under the American legal system, and the American legal system is very democratic and very stable. Because now what you get is that oil actually does get given back to the people. So they get about, $1,000 every year, I believe. They get every inhabitant of Alaska. They just take the value of the oil and they distribute it to the people. So that's a good idea, maybe, right? But if you don't live under a very stable system, but you live in a developing country that's already very unstable, then there's nothing forcing the leaders to kick back the money to the people, and so they're going to try and pocket it themselves. But now if I'm pocketing it, and there's a bad guy who would also like it to pocket him, he's going to fight me over it. Right? And I'm going to see him coming, so I'm going to try and take him out, and all the other ones, and they're going to try to take me out, and that's how you get civil wars in all these places. This is the quick and dirty version, but that's roughly the dynamic. Yeah, Reggie. Sorry.
Okay, with that argument, when you say the country's leaders, let's take Africa for instance, because Africa has been divided up for just so many years, decades, or whatever, and isn't that usually because of the outside influences of the global economic order, say China, Russia, United States, and everybody put outside influences in Africa to cause the civil wars and to cause as far as the different nations in Africa to fight each other or to just keep it divided up so they can go in there and take the resources that it has and bring them to America, Russia, China, Germany, all the rest of the world. So, how can I say it? When you say it's unjust, the global economic order is unjust, but isn't it made to be unjust? So you can go in and steal, different resources from these small developing countries?
Do you want to talk? Is it in this point?
Yeah. Like part of the research, the resource, I don't know how it's called, but part of it is that the other
privilege
that the other countries allow for this to happen, that they allow for the leader of the different countries to sell and to them. Right. Like, I don't know, Germany says, okay, we're fine with whoever is the leader of that country as long as we can still get our oil. And that's part of the privilege that the other countries accept that, and in that way exploit those people who have no access to their own resources.
See, what my thing is, my thing would be, wouldn't Germany or the United States, whoever, the superpower, put that person into play?
So that might be, right, so
they can say, oh, well.
That could be true, right, so it could be true. If that's true, then the situation is even worse than what Poggi is talking about, right? So that's a very nefarious analysis of politics. I don't know enough. Maybe it's true. I'm not sure. But in any case, for the theory that Poggi is trying to develop, if you're right and that's exactly what's going on, then his theory is in a very strong position, right? Because then there is, in addition to what he's talking about, there is this further conspiratorial layer of how Western countries are actually forcing developing countries to stay and be poor. But even if that's not true, right? Even if it's just sort of like an artifact of international law, and all Germany is thinking is, well, this is international law. It's been around for centuries. We're bound. We've signed up to this, and not sure how we can reform it quickly. And in any case, there might be some good reasons for it, historically for it anyway. That might be enough, but that's still right. That international law is still causing the conflict and the poverty in these countries, and it's still something that the world at large is imposing on them. Right? So even if we don't go all nefarious, and if that's true, it's even worse, right? It's more horrible than it already is. But even if that's not true, right? Poggi thinks you're still in a position where you're imposing rules on these other countries that are actively harming them, and so to say that we should do something to help the world's poor, you don't need to invoke something like Singer's, like you have to rescue people who are drowning. That theory. We just say, stop hurting them. Right? That's what's actually going on, he thinks. All right. Right. Well, quickly, so I'm going to carve it up. There's two moral premises, number 1 and number 4, right? So see what he says about this quickly. He doesn't go too far. So here's basically the idea, right? So if you impose this order, then you need a justification. We talked about this already, right? But just the intuition behind this is like if you're coercively, by force, through the police or armies and so on, through the international legal system, making people live by certain rules, that's not necessarily unacceptable or unjust, but it is something that needs defending, right? It needs to be acceptable for that to be acceptable, I guess. So it's not yet. This is not at this point. We're not yet claiming that the global order exists, that it coerces or harms or anything, right? It's just saying that if that is true, if that global order does exist and does coerce and does harm, as we were talking about, well, then we better have a good story to tell in defense of that order, right? So that's just this first premise. It's a very simple, straightforward idea. So then the fourth here is that, well, if it's both, if this thing exists, right, and it coerces and it harms and so on, and it's imposed by a small minority and it puts the majority, this large majority, in this life-threatening poverty, then it's wrong. Well, this is, again, pretty straightforward, he thinks, right? It's very plausible. Such a minimal standard, right? Like even something that's highly unequal could pass, could be acceptable by the standard if only everyone had a vote on it or something, right? If it was true that these poor countries had freely and voluntarily accepted it, these rules of the game, then maybe it would be a different situation that they were so poor. But that's not true, he thinks. Many of these countries they were created only after decolonization, right? These rules existed already, and they were imposed by the old colonizers, and they wrote it for their benefit. Right? They just came late to the game, and now they're expected to play by these rules. And you might say, well, they can go to the WTO or something, right, and fight it, but then when, let's say, Bolivia comes and says to America, well, we need to change their international economic rules, they're not going to get very far, right? They best hope that America even takes the call. They just don't have the power to sway this. So, he gives an example of sub-Brazil, and he says, think about the situation in an individual country. Not the world, just think about an individual country. Think an individual country was run in such a way that there's a small minority that's creating a law in the country that's putting the large majority in absolute destitute poverty. And it could be different. It's not democratic, right? It's not equal. It's a minority really impoverishing a majority. Would you accept this? He said, nobody would accept it. We think this is one of the world's worst countries. Right? Says, but then he thinks, well, now scale it up to the entire world. That's exactly the world we live in. So he thinks probably, right, that something much more demanding can also be defended. But he says, I don't even have to defend you my whole demanding, possibly controversial theory. If we just accept this really uncontroversial minimal demand that just says the world shouldn't be like this horrific sub-Brazil country, that is already enough to get the conclusion going that the world is really messed up. It's the world's rich in the West, coercing and harming, literally threatening the lives of the world's poor. Right. So here's the descriptive or the empirical premises. Right. So the other two premises are claims about how the world actually is, not moral claims, but descriptions. Right. So global order substantially impacts people, economic freedoms, and opportunities. Already talked about that too. Right. But so he's looking at international law, and particularly now in this chapter at how international law constrains self-determination and local domestic legislation. So these resource and borrowing privileges, so the fact that the effective government of a country gets to sell off the oil, the diamonds, or what have you, copper. And then the borrowing privilege, he talks a lot about this too. So if you're the effective government of a country, no matter whether you're democratic or not, you get to take out loans, right? So you get to take out, but loans, not personal loans, like you go to the bank and you say, I'm the president, and they might have a mortgage or something. That's a personal loan. But they take out a loan in name of the country as the head of government, but then line their pockets with this. And that has the same dynamic. The other one is intellectual property rights, like patents. So he claims, well, that's going to really impact people's economic freedoms and opportunities for the reasons we talked about. Yeah. Same point here. And then 5, it actually is imposed by a small minority, and it does contribute to the majority being an avoidable life-threatening poverty. So, 3 steps to this. Right? International law, mainly the problem of international negotiations, which are dominated by the West. Right? That's the point I was just saying. Like if Bolivia wants to challenge the U.S. and say, we need to change these patent rules, they're not going to get very far. So it's not they're not playing on an equal playing field, he thinks. Now we talked earlier this term about what the definition of a state is under international law. It's basically a territory, a stable population, a government. That's it, more or less. And the ability to enter into treaties. That's it. So, pretty much anyone who has power over people qualifies. Right? But then, if you have that, right, now you get the right to sell off your resources and to take out loans. And that's the perverse combination, right? It's not necessarily that loans are horrible or that resources are horrible. It's the combination of loans and resources where you get the right to take out the loan or sell the resources if you're the one in power. Because that creates a big reward for being in power. And now you have a tremendous power struggle going on that's going to harm people's opportunities. And so there's the borrowing privilege and the resource privilege. That's the basic argument here. So it's not a benefit argument, right? Like Singer's, it's not saying that we should help, but it's a harm-based argument. He thinks we should stop harming. That's basically the idea here. All right, that went pretty quick. Any questions, Alex? All right, well, we'll pick up here next time. Look at me finishing 1 minute early. All right. Have a good weekend. I'm not going to make any joke about voting.